It's the people that drive me, not the companies. The companies, what I learned was when you do this great work with leaders, the results are a byproduct for the company. And so it's really people first. I always tell myself that to get anchored before I go on stage is there are some or one person in this room that I get to serve here. And who is it going to be? We're living in our own algorithms where we just keep confirming and confirming our own fears and beliefs by searching. Then everything keeps confirming and confirming that it's really scary. We're creating our own reality based fear systems by all of this, that it's like, how do we unplug, how do we disconnect and just remember.
Hello and welcome to Along the Way Life's Journey. I'm your host, Carl Buccellato. I've told you many times I've traveled millions of miles around this beautiful earth of ours, and I had the good fortune of meeting wonderful, wonderful people. The best of the best, and sometimes the worst of the worst. But there's more best of the best in this world. What you have to do is open your mind to meet them and allow them to reach you and speak to you. I have such a woman here today. Her name is Jackie Insinger. She has tremendous practice. She's a psychologist. She has applied her capabilities and skills to businesses all over the world, impacting not only the business result, but the individuals and the people who she has counseled and guided through. She has degrees from both Duke and Harvard, and she's one of these wonderful people who's on the council of both Duke's Council of Coaches and Harvard's advisory panel. So that's quite an interesting lady. And more important than that, which I love the idea of talking about, she lives in Denver with her husband and two sons, and they have this great big dog. But we'll hear more about that later. And Jackie, as I said to you later, I'm so happy to have you on the show today. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. What a lovely introduction. I'd love to hear all about your millions of miles of travels and all the people you met.
Well, you can read my book. It's on the book. I'll be happy to talk
Done.
about it at another time. Sometimes I get carried away with this stuff. I'm an octogenarian, which means that when I start to go off on a trail, you have to pull me back. I'm not quite at the debate level yet where that guy was, but I'm pretty good. So tell us something about Jackie and who you are and what inspired you to drive and get this type of an education and focus on how you could create something that would impact not only the business atmosphere but the lives of people that you do business with. You have created what's called a platinum leadership, where you direct people to really be bigger and better than they are. That's what I want to hear about. Tell us about Jackie.
Oh gosh, where there's so many different avenues you can go down from that question. And I think part of it, I'll pull out a few parts. When you said, where did this drive come from? I think that was just in my DNA. We've had a family very focused on education. Even my great grandmother had a college degree.
Wow.
My grandmother had a master's degree. My mom had a master's degree. It was just kind of in our family. My dad's a PhD. And just this desire to learn was always in me. And my sister's a clinical psychologist. So I think this just education value was a big part of who I am. And my parents always supported me in terms of learning and growing and having that part of my desire for achievement, but also the curiosity factor that comes with that. And I think there was not just the, oh, achieve to get these degrees. It was really this curiosity that you can be satisfied. And the higher up you go in education, the more you can really refine your focus and learn the things you really want to learn. Right.
Right.
So
Right.
that was kind of the part of that, why the drive. And, in terms of why this, it was a really squiggly path. I kind of made up stuff as I went along, which was really, it's exciting and it's scary to just, really follow your gut and your heart. And, you mentioned the results for companies that also have results for people. It's the people that drive me, not the companies. The companies, what I learned was when you do this great work with leaders, the results are a byproduct for the company. And so it's really people first. And when you figure out how to do this great work to make people love to work again, to feel energized, to feel engaged, to feel committed. The outcome is the companies get better results. So that's where my heart is on the people side, and that's always what I've studied is the people side and how that affects, as a byproduct, the things that companies wanna see.
I think that's wonderful. As I said a moment ago, I'm an old codger, and I've been in business. I was in business for more than 60 years. Built and grew many companies. A couple of them ended up being unicorns, so with thousands and
Wow.
thousands of employees. And the one thing I do know is that the greatest asset I ever had in my life were my people, the absolute greatest. And there's nothing better you can do than to inspire them to grow and be more than they were when they came to you, to to find bigger places not only in the company but in life. And I was so honored to do that many times with people. So you got your education, you got into the business world. See, you wrote a wonderful book called Spark and Brilliance, right? How's it doing?
It's doing great. It's been really fun. I published it a little over 2 years ago, and, it's been really exciting to see the response to it. It's always risky, as you know from writing a book. All these things you put out there to the world, and you hope that people love it, and it's been fun. It hit, like, 8, number 1 bestseller in business categories and been rated really highly and stuff, and the best part of it is when I get, you know, an email or a message from somebody telling me how and why this impacted them, and it was exactly what they needed in the moment they needed it, and that's the driver where you're like, "Oh, wow, that's why I wrote it."
And that tells you you're exactly where you're supposed to be in life. You're putting in all the effort, all the work. You're getting accolades. I'm sure they're paying you well, and you're making all those wonderful things that we aspire to in America. But when somebody says something like that, and you know that the way you labored over putting those words on that paper was important because it touched somebody else's life, and I can't think of anything more important that we can do as human beings on this earth than to reach out and inspire someone else. It's just wonderful.
I agree 100%, and, when I give a keynote, I get nervous, especially in, like, really big rooms, and I always tell myself, the privilege of the platform, right? Like, I get to share my message, and there's somebody in this room who needs to hear this today, and I always tell myself that to get anchored before I go on stage is there are some or one person in this room that I get to serve here, and who is it gonna be, right? And just thinking about that is really like it brings it all back in, when you're feeling that nervous energy, and so that's always what I think about.
And one of the things that's always been exciting to me is we look at people and we're so gratified when we see that spark in their face and in their eyes, but we never really, at least I haven't had much experience. You may have. We never really get to know what the after effect is. It's kind of like coming across a pond that's stagnant, not a ripple, and you throw a pedal in the middle and it goes ring after ring after ring. And you can think to yourself, this little spark I've given this person is not only sparking them, but hopefully it's sparking a ring of each generation that comes after them. You know, what what are you doing for this world of ours? There is hope for this world. I believe it. I'm an optimist. I'm a cockeyed optimist. I believe there's hope for this world.
I am too, and a lot of this work, I talk a lot about, like, energy contagion and emotional contagion, and with that research, what we know is that it only takes 33 milliseconds for our brain to read and identify someone's emotions and take them on. So, studies show if you put 3 complete strangers in a room for 2 minutes, whoever has the most dominant emotion will spread to the other 2 strangers, good or bad. What we know from leaders is leaders' contagion doesn't just impact the layer below them, but also the layer below them. So, for these leaders, people that they may not interact with at all will take on their mood and outlook and emotion by how they choose to show up in a moment. So, the way I think about it from a human perspective, from a life perspective, when a leader turns on their Zoom camera and how they choose to show up with their energy and outlook and emotion in that moment could impact, right, not just the team member, but how they maybe interact with their spouse, how that spouse then interacts with the child, how that child then interacts with their friend at school who might have been having a tough morning, right? And it just cascades and cascades. So, this ripple effect that you're talking about with the pebble in the water, I think about that all the time, right? It's this cascade effect that we have the opportunity and the privilege as leaders to decide how we want that to spread that day and whose lives we can impact by just pausing and knowing the power, right? The power that we have when we turn on the camera, when we walk in the room. Just, it's such an opportunity to, in my mind, thinking big, right? Change the world. It's such a
Absolutely.
negative place that
Absolutely.
what can we do? Everybody's like, well, we can't do anything as individuals. Like, what can I do? It's like, that's what you can do. You can decide how you show up.
You know, in the middle of the last half of the 20th century, there were many paradigm shifts that took place in our culture, educationally, politically, or everything that went on. I wrote a lot about that in my book. And of course, during the war years, we had to learn how to change so many things that we had taken for granted from previous experiences in the military. And I remember taking a test that the government called the FIRO B. And the FIRO B, have you heard of it?
Oh,
Okay, I didn't think so. You're too young for that. The FIRO B tests people to see how they would react under distress and under fire when the leadership has been taken out. Who's the second level of people that will raise to the occasion? Who can you look to that will take responsibility and become a natural leader? And the FIRO B did that for many military groups, but particularly for submarine people. What would happen if the captain and the first mate were taken out? Who's going to take leadership in this tub under the ocean? It was a very interesting study. And uh, I was really surprised that that wasn't used more often as you got into the natural world of for education for leaders in business and so forth. But I did use it a few times in some of my businesses, and I found it very very reliable. People who you would hire on one level of things, and the test said that they, regardless of what the stress was, they are not going to melt away. They're going to hold fast, and they're going to do what's necessary. And many times, I had businesses here in Florida when hurricanes hit. You can imagine the distress in people's minds when there's no communication and the power is down. But we would have an emergency plan in advance, and we knew just who the people would be who could get those wireless telephone communicators, satellite telephone communicators, because they're the ones who would react. They're the ones who would make sure it happened. And I think those
where in
kinds of things should be used more.
yeah, it's like a very intense succession planning method.
Yes, it
Um,
was.
but
Yes.
where in Florida are you? Or are you still in Florida?
I live in Coral Springs, Florida, which is a bedroom community of Fort Lauderdale.
I know it
And
well.
do you really? Uh,
I grew
uh,
up in Miami.
oh, then you know. I spent. I moved to Florida on election day 1975. I was born
Okay.
and raised in New York. We moved to
Where in New York?
Florida. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. Lived on Staten Island and Manhattan, but came here. But born and raised in Brooklyn, and when we came here to Florida, there was it was lots of cow pasture. There was not much here at the time, and I built a very large business here, a number of businesses here, and it was very good to me. And the youngest of my four children was born here. I have four adult children, five grandchildren, and six great grandchildren, all living in all but two living in Florida. And
That's amazing.
hey, I'm 82 years old. I deserve
Uh-huh.
it.
You do. It sounds like you've earned this to have all this amazing large family close.
Thank you. Well, it's like any life. You have your ups and your downs. You have your good times and your bad times. I've said a couple of times I had a couple of very successful businesses, but I had a couple of failures also. Anyone who tells you they don't have misses along the way while they're building enormity, they're liars. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody fails. You have to overcome those things. And I've been blessed a couple of times to have companies that were on the New York Stock Exchange and reached the unicorn level
That's incredible.
a couple of times.
Congratulations. Big
Yeah,
feat.
thank you, thank you. But let's talk about you. Let's not talk about me. Give us an idea when you go hired by a company, probably a Fortune 500 or a Fortune 100 company. They'll bring you in. They'll give you an overview of what it is that's going on in the company, and they'll ask you for certain modifications to help create change, either in production or in personnel issues or what have you. And then I imagine you do your own evaluation. You may listen to what people tell you, but you know well enough. There's always three sides to every story, so you got to do your own
Yeah.
evaluation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tell us, how does that work? What do you do?
So for me, what I've really shifted my focus to is leadership and how to really elevate leadership to what the world and what people need today, to not just stay at their jobs, but stay and thrive and be committed and feel seen and valued. And this is the place they want to be. And we have so much data about what people want now, right? We're so fortunate. We've got so much data that's constantly coming out when you have four active generations in the workplace. Now have hybrid and remote environments, this pace of change. We've got AI. We've got so much stuff, highest burnout rates, lowest engagement scores. And we know what people want because they're telling us. So what I do is take this data and work on strategies using, neuroscience and positive psychology, which I went back and studied, and really creating strategies, testing them, proving them, condensing them down so they take up the minimal amount of time for leaders to execute because we've done that work already, and kind of create a how-to guide for them to drip out these different strategies to their direct reports to create kind of that systemic culture change internally, because as you said, people are your greatest asset. So how do we get the people to feel what they need to feel today, given all these changes in the world? So really created frameworks and systems for leaders to execute and implement at their companies to be able to create an environment and a culture where people want to work today, and do their best and really perform at their peak. So that's really been my focus, is really on, you know, creating these leadership accelerators based on all the current data today that won't take up a lot of leaders' time, because what we know, right? Leaders don't have time. And most programs and trainings are about, here's 4,000 modules and
Yeah,
offsite days and coaching. And it's like, here's how many hours we can give you. And that's supposed to equate value. But after working with leaders for 20 years, I don't know one leader who gets excited about that. They're
no,
like thrilled if they can have a lunch break, much less like take on this new huge endeavor. So my thing is like, how do we create something that takes a minimal amount of time that creates a maximum ROI? Right? So that's where I do the work on the front end to then have them just implement and execute in a way that feels fulfilling and rewarding for the leader, and then, creates an ROI for the leader, the team, and the company.
that's amazing stuff. I'm thinking back in the old days, and I did some instructing for American Management and American Marketing Association back in the 80s, the dinosaur era. That was so primitive. We used to teach. I'll give you an idea. That was so primitive. We used to teach leaders to first do time management study, to evaluate what they were doing with their own time. That's how
Yeah.
primitive it was in
Yeah.
those
We
days.
still do that. People
Well, I'm
still
sure
have
you
to do
have
that.
to.
Yeah.
We live in a culture now where we have half the culture telling people uh, the rich people have everything. You're never going to get anything until they have it. And then we have the flip side of that, where people are saying, well, if you work hard and you apply yourself, you can become anything in this country. And I believe that to be true. You can aspire and work hard and become anything within your range of willingness, in this country. We have to, I think I hear of so many young people that are disheartened, that think they can get, that even the entry level jobs are demeaning. There's nothing they can do to really overcome what half of the world is telling me, that there's no purpose or place for them in tomorrow. When in fact, we live in a world where this generation can make more return on their investment, their time investment, than any generation in the past. They have greater opportunity than anyone in the past if they just apply themselves. And I think the magic is to get them to understand and believe that, to aspire to be great employees, but also to recognize that they can become entrepreneurs. They can develop on their own. They can they can build. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I have 2 kids that are Gen Z. So it's, one's about to start college and one's, 14 and, really instilling that in them about, how much is within their control. And since they were little, I always say, my ask is you show up 100% every day. And sometimes your 100% is gonna look pretty crappy, right? But as long as it's your 100%, that's all that you can do, right? But just show up. You just gotta show up every day. And, and that does it's not always pretty, but that's the best you can do. And as long as you do that, you're gonna be moving in the right direction. And that's always what we talk about.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about Simon and Miles now. We're going to put a
Yes.
name to
Yes, Simon
it.
and Miles. Yep. Simon and
and
Miles.
and what is the dog? The Newfoundland's name is Haley.
Haley. Yep.
Big
Yep.
Nasty.
We call her Nasty. Yes, I live with a husband and 2 sons. So, yeah, our nicknames around here aren't, like, super, like, Flower and Rainbow Child. It's a beautiful, fairy. Like, no, it's all, we got Big Nasty.
Yeah, you got a
Yep.
masculine world you got to deal with.
I do. We've got a lot of testosterone around here, but I've got my girl dog, but she's, yeah, 135 pounds,
Wow,
and
that's a
yeah,
big dog.
she's a big
So
dog,
you
yeah.
live in Denver. Do you get out into the country? I'm sure you take your boys and you go skiing and you get out into the mountains and do all that. Otherwise, why live in Denver? You know.
We do. My husband, Rob, is from Idaho, and so he is just this super outdoorsy, hiking, backpacking, skiing, and so our boys are very into all that. We've got a real outdoorsy adventure family that really finds their peace in the outside, like by a river in the mountains, turning off, unplugging. So we spend a lot of time outside kind of exploring and doing those things. Yeah.
It's wonderful. As I said in my opening, I've traveled all over this world, and some of the most gratifying times for me have been when I've gotten away from the lights and the glitz and the five-star hotel, and you know, built a lean-to and spent the night under the stars up in the Wasatch Mountains or up in, you know, in Switzerland somewhere where it's just nothing but the sky with stars that you never knew were there in the city. You look up all your life and all you see is a blur. You don't see any. There's a haze in the distance, but when you go into the wilderness and you look up into the sky and you see those magnificent stars up there, there's no doubt in my mind that there's a creator. There can't possibly any doubt. You know,
Yeah,
just can't.
and that's the perspective check that I think is so missing today, right? We are such a busy culture. Everybody's busy, everybody's inundated, everybody's calendars are packed. We're all running probably like on an empty tank all the time. Self-care is like taking your dog on a walk, which is something it's probably also a task. And so it's just to separate, to pause, to unplug where you don't have service as an option, right? And
That's
just
right.
be in nature, remind yourself about this connection and sitting around with the people you love under the stars, like you're saying. It just really, to me, just refuels my soul to remember, right? It's just almost like remembering, like,
It
oh,
is a
this.
memory. It's an
Yeah.
eternal memory. Mankind has that inside of us, like our DNA. It's in there. We don't know it's in there until we get to experience it, but it's in there.
Yeah, 100%. So I agree, especially things just keep changing faster and faster. This world is not slowing down. Nothing. That's the only thing we know. Nothing's slowing down. And so, how do we remember? How do we build in time to remember and reset ourselves a little bit to get that perspective? Because it's so easy to get so caught up and start spinning and spinning on things that are out of our control. And there's so much fear and a lot of it rightfully so. And there's so many things right now going on in the world that we can get so caught up in and go down so many rabbit holes. Online now we're living in our own algorithms where we just keep confirming and confirming our own fears and beliefs by searching, and everything keeps confirming and confirming that it's really scary. We're creating our own reality based fear systems by all of this, that it's like, how do we unplug? How do we, disconnect and just remember?
You know, it's funny. I had lunch this afternoon with a group of friends that I have, men in the men's group from the church I belong to. And one of the things we were talking about is one of the lines, frequent line in the Bible that says the Lord tells us, "Fear not." He says that more often in Scripture than just about anything. Fear not. And when you think that this world that we live in, they hammer at us in every way with they make mountains out of molehills to make everything be a gigantic disaster. There are disasters, of course, but there are things that are just blown up out of proportion with propaganda and hyperbole. And if we take the time to sit quietly and just listen to the inner voice in our own mind, in our own soul, we find places where we can find truth. We can find that peace. It's not missing from this world. It's being screamed at from many ways. For me, I have to learn to turn off that TV at night.
Oh yeah, there's an interesting thing. So I studied. I was part of a program at MIT Sloan, their business school, called Neuroscience for Business. And one of the coolest takeaways from that, that's related to what we're talking about, that I love sharing with people, is the professor. She's a PhD in neuroscience. She's a MD in psychiatry, and she's a professor at MIT. She's just brilliant woman, and she's been studying your gut brain, as they call it, like what is going on. And not just her, there's a whole world and discipline around this. And what they found is, in your gut, it's almost, and I'm going to say this probably incorrectly, it's almost identical to your brain in your neurons, your neural pathways, all of that stuff, how it works. And the more they see that, what the hypothesis is that she shared with us is, when you have a gut feeling, when you have an intuition, what that is actually stored memories that we cannot access in our conscious mind. So this is almost like our higher power brain that is our wisdom. And yeah, the way that they're studying it and how it functions, to me, it was just fascinating to think, like, we can't access it up here. So we think and we think and we think, but we've got this stored wisdom that we can't access here. That if we allow ourselves to stop thinking about something and start feeling about something, we then can get an answer from a place of higher wisdom that's within us, right? So it's sometimes looking at it, in a different way. You can look at a spiritual perspective, you can look at it from this perspective, but it all kind of comes together in a way that really resonated.
I really understand that because, in my layman's language, this uneducated guinea kid from Brooklyn would say it's my instincts. You walk into a street, you didn't hear the car, but your instinct pulls you back. You're walking through an environment. When I was younger, an environment with danger where people were hiding behind trees looking to kill me. My instinct says stop. You know, it's inside of you. It is your memory inside of you that was given to the primitive man to survive on Earth, and it's still there. Nothing that was given over the millenniums is gone. It's just been masked over with more junk data, and we don't really focus on it as much as we should. I'm glad you're aware of that because I didn't think people under the age of 50 knew that.
Mhm. And they're teaching it at MIT.
Are they really? That's
This was
wonderful.
a program at MIT where I
That's
learned that
wonderful.
from their neuroscience division, and it was in the business school, and it was all about,
In
like,
the
just even.
business school. That's wonderful.
It was in the graduate school of business, and the program was neuroscience for business. And this module was really about why leaders need to use their intuition to make decisions, and making sure that they incorporate their gut, their instinct, their intuition, because of this stored wisdom that's not filtered through our emotional reaction system, through our brain that already has these biases in them, but really going down to this source of wisdom that we have access to, that we don't usually bring into decision making.
Wow. I have to read more about that. Let me just write that down. Tell me what the name of it was.
So there's a book by the professor that's amazing called The Source. It's called The Source. And her name is Dr. Tara Swart, Swart. She's brilliant. She was my professor there.
Okay, I'm going to get that because that's very exciting to me, that kind of thing. Really exciting. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you're going to want to ask many questions, Jackie, and you're going to want to find out more and more about what she does and how to contact her. Don't worry about it. All her contact information will be in the show notes. You'll know how to go to her website. You'll know how to reach her, how to get her book, how to, employ her to come and speak to your people. If you have a problem with one of your, or you just want to be smart and grow your business, call her and she'll come out and help you do that. So Jackie, what's coming up? What are you dealing with in the near future that anyone would like to be aware of?
Well, I guess there's twofold. One is really refining and creating new leadership programs that we measure all the results. We've been measuring results forever, but really creating diagnostics and real dashboards so people can see the change and the growth. Because right now there is a lot of fear. And I think there's a lot of things that sound good but don't really do the work. So, really creating more robust and different things designed for companies. So, that's the corporate side. On another side that's super cool is we are launching Spark Brilliance for educators. We've been piloting it in the school system and got incredible results on depression, hope scales for this is for at-risk kids so far, where we were testing this out with real big education research team that are PhDs from universities. And we saw test scores go up. We saw teachers burnout go down. We saw engagement from teachers change. We saw attendance rates. Oh, we saw all these amazing changes. So we're just getting grant funding to really build this out for schools. And we're doing a real big pilot in August to really test with this new program we built to see if, the work that I created for corporations for leaders to bring to their direct reports, when we tailor it for teachers to bring to students, what changes? How do kids feel different and motivated and inspired and trust and seen and heard and believed in? And how do teachers make this seamless to develop these authentic relationships to then really change the course for these kids? And so we're testing it in a really challenging population and seeing incredible results so that we can scale this out to kids and educators throughout the country.
So you're doing it as a pilot. I'm sure you're dealing with a little kickback from the teachers' unions and things like that that you got to get past. But
We're
or are
doing
they
in
supportive?
charter
In charter
system, a
school. That's
school
I was going to
system.
say that. Okay,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
going to give
Yep.
your name to a young lady that I know who runs a company that serves schools and charter schools in Florida, Georgia, and a number of other states. And they specialize in not only remedial reading, but dealing with children who are autistic and how to overcome those issues. And there are some studies that have been done recently that they said some 22% of the student body have been diagnosed as being autistic or dyslexic. And after going through new testing that they have developed, they've determined less than half of that is true. Even though these kids are being treated with medication, less than half of it is true. Much of it has to do with a deficiency in their vision, where you can teach children how to see differently and wear different glasses, and the autism and the dyslexia reduces enormously, incredibly so. And I've put them together with a man that I know who owns the largest network of charter schools in the country. So I'm going to put you together with them.
I would love to meet both of them.
I
That would be
think I
incredible.
think I think there's a magic elixir there for all three of you. So
I would love
I'll do
thank
that.
you.
I'll do that. I think that we have to do something for these generations. They lost so much with having to stay at home during the pandemic, and our rating as a nation has gone down so much educationally, and our children are unprepared. We have to do anything possible to overcome that. So I'm happy to do that. Happy to do that.
Thank thank you. Thank
So
you.
we're coming to ironically, it's 35 minutes already. Can you believe that? Seems like I just said
It's
hello to
true.
you.
No, I agree. I agree.
Can you come back and do this again? Because there's a whole bunch of things I'd like to talk about.
100%. Would
I,
love that.
I'd love to have you back on the show.
I would
So,
love to be back.
ladies and gentlemen, really reach out. You're going to get all of Jackie's information. Reach out, speak to her, ask the questions, daydream about what's possible, what ifs. If we don't think about the what ifs in this world, we'll never get to them. And here's a lady who understands how to make it practical. how to make it happen. So reach out to them. Any last thing you'd like to say to the folks before I make a closing comment?
Just that, choose how you show up. Choose how you interact with the people you love. We often take them the most for granted, and these are the people that we have the greatest impact on throughout every hour of every day. And so we can choose to bring positivity, we can choose to bring joy. That is our choice. And so, just if anything you take from this today, remember that emotional contagion and show up for the people you love.
You know, Jackie, I say every day on this show two things. First, I remind people you have a story of your own. Everybody has their own story, and no one can tell it like you can. Write it down, share it with your loved ones, your family, the people you know, because when it's too late, and all that wisdom is gone. Share it with others. The world needs it. And the second thing I say every day is kind of what Jackie just said. What do I know? I'm a big blustery guy from Brooklyn. All I know is you got to get somebody you know today, give them a big bear hug, and tell them you love them. Tell them you love them. It may be the only time they hear those words. And I'm quite sure God loves them too. Tell them you love them. So, Jackie, you know what's coming up. I love you, Jackie.
Oh, I love you right back and big bear hug.
Right at you. Thank you so much. Ladies and
Thank you.
gentlemen, if you like the show, subscribe. Write in your comments. Make your suggestions. We'd love to have you anytime. Bye bye, Jackie. We'll do it again. I promise.
See you soon.
Bye bye.